Oh, oh, voilà, ça marche. Bonjour à tous et à toutes. Je vais être très très court, mais d'abord je voudrais vous remercier et remercier tous les gens qui sont en live, puisque tous ces événements et ces tables rondes qui vont suivre sont live streamés sur les réseaux sociaux et de Renew, mais aussi de pas mal de partis nationaux qui nous suivent et qui étaient présents juste avant à la réunion que nous avons fait avec les chefs d'État et de gouvernement de la famille Renew, avec les commissaires européens et l'ensemble des chefs de partis qui ont souhaité venir échanger avec nous sur un contexte politique qui est particulier. Alors ces trois tables rondes participent à la doctrine politique que le groupe parlementaire soutient depuis longtemps, l'état de droit, les questions économiques, les questions de récupération économique et budgétaire. On a énormément sur les valeurs développées de thématiques au niveau du Parlement européen. Tous ces sujets seront évidemment abordés dans les trois tables rondes. Je vous remercie d'être là et je remercie aussi à l'ensemble, en tout cas des militants qui nous suivent sur les réseaux sociaux et l'ensemble des élus qui nous suivent sur les territoires de leur soutien. Voilà, et je vais laisser clairement la parole et le début de la table ronde à les prochains intervenants. Merci beaucoup et bonne conférence.
Okay, I think now we can really start. It's the time. Welcome, everybody. I think you perfectly know these ladies and gentlemen that will talk with us for 35 minutes, but let me present them. I'm very, very happy to meet. And Sigrid Kaag, she's a Minister of Finance and Deputy Prime Minister in the Dutch government. You all know this man here, I think, but I mean, Luis Garicano, Vice President of our group and excellent economist, and Michal Kobosco, already not an old but a very good friend of us, Vice Chairman of Polska 2050, as Szymon Hołownia unfortunately had some family commitment and he couldn't be with us. We have now 33 minutes. I would like to do 2 rounds of questions with our guest, and then I would like also to leave a few minutes, I hope 5-7 minutes, for a Q&A with the audience. And I will start to you all three with the first question. This morning, I heard on the news that Putin, in the meeting with the BRICS, with the power of Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, has proposed to create a common currency. So, I mean, there is a world which is organizing around blocs, around political blocs, around maybe economic blocs, trade blocs. We have been always in favor of open market, open trade, globally. So what is the challenge for the liberals and the Democrats today? I mean, should we work around an openness based on shared democracy and fundamental values? Should we, however, push for open trade with anybody? Is the future still an open world, or is the future a world that organized around bloc? This is the very easy question that I would like to answer in a few minutes, please.
much more assertive about in the negotiations and in the quid pro quo. But if you were to say, as what I understood from your question as well, select the partners whom you can trade with, I think we can neither afford it, and it presumes that globalization is hitting an era of deglobalization. The trade numbers don't show it, and I think we need to be selective, assertive, and make choices. Then you come to a world where open strategic autonomy needs to be invested. We need to invest in the competitors. We need to ensure we grow the types of enterprises for the future. But to say this block is bad, that block is good, I think we'll never reach that. But we need to be firm of how we procure and where we procure it from. China, for instance, is of course the elephant in the room in that regard. We cannot be so-called independent of goods from China. No company is. No company has reshored to the extent that they said they would in Corona times. Do we need to change, shift gear, and be much more mindful? Yes. Do we need to pay attention to human rights abuses? Absolutely so. But we need to do this together and not have variation also amongst countries or companies. So due diligence here and legislation by the EU, coupled with firm and assertive trade agreements, I think could pave a way. But this is multi-year. And the Eurozone, last but not least, interesting that there's an attempt to have a new currency, of course, away from the dollar. I think let's focus on stability within the Eurozone first before we worry about the currencies of others.
So, Luis, we must be selective, we must be assertive, and we must act through a rules-based approach.
So I guess my answer is different than it would have been 3 months ago. I guess for the sake of having a debate, at least, let me explore the alternative. So the alternative, which is, what are the lessons that we have learned in the last 3 months? And what are the lessons that we've learned from China as well? That we play by the rules against people or with people who don't play by the rules and who use our abiding by the rules against us. And there are 4 areas: human rights, dependence, strategic value chains, dependence for producing goods, for sure defense, and environment, where we need to demarcate the groups in a different way. Either, in my view, from Australia, New Zealand, LATAM, to Korea, Japan, Indonesia, us, the US, Canada, we could start a different organization. The WTO hasn't done its job. We thought, you know, change through trade. That was their big idea.
But they did well recently.
Yes, well, change through trade. The idea was that these countries would start trading and they become nice. Okay, nice means respect human rights, respects workers' rights, respect environment, and respect our intellectual property. That hasn't happened. The truth is that China has been turning every day more into a hostile power. And what has happened today with Ukraine could have happened tomorrow, could happen, or could have happened yesterday with Taiwan. This is actually, I mean, China says it is going to happen, and they're doing every day 25 flyovers over Taiwan. So I would say we need to conceive of an extended NATO, where we say, look, for environmental reasons, we have a climate club. Climate clubs means those who are inside abide by the commitments with the planet. Those who are outside are going to have to pay a price for trading with us. A defense club, a strategic supply club, and economic value chain security of supply club. I think that this is going to be inevitable, an inevitable lesson of what Russia is trying to teach us and what China is trying to teach us. I know it's not what we have been arguing for 3 decades, but I think that this is the lesson of the WTO entry of China and of Russia's aggression.
Thank you, Luis. Michel, one of the leaders around the table 1 hour ago said that what is happening also in global trade and in economy has happened in these weeks, and is happening in these weeks is going to change the rule of the game for at least one generation. And we mentioned Russia, we mentioned Russian idea of having a common currency with the BRICS, seen from Warsaw, these challenges. And as we talk about common currency, what about Poland joining the Eurozone one day?
Thank you, Sandro. Specifically for the last part of your question, I will try to answer this as well. First of all, let me thank you. A very short thank you. This is the first time that representatives of our party, Polska 2050, are joining this kind of conversation together with our political family, with Renew Europe. We are more than happy to join the family, and we will work hard on a joint success in the next European elections of 2024. So, as I said, this is our first time, definitely not the last time. And then going to your question, we are where we are. Yes, we had this meeting with the heads of states and the commissioners and the leaders of national parties earlier today, and what we heard from them is that they do have a full understanding that this is a revolution, what's going on today. It's not gonna be a business as usual any longer. We cannot just say, okay, the war will finish sooner or later, and then we sit down to the table with the Putin and his cronies, and we start to, or restart our talks, and we start our businesses. No, it's, as Sandro said, this is a generation, or I would say numerous generations that will see the effects of what's going on this year. This is actually already 4 months since the war started. So 4 months that changed Europe, that changed our world, that are influencing almost all areas of our private lives and our public lives and public activities. So we have to understand this, that it's not gonna, you know, come back to the place where we were on February 23rd. We are in a very different position already, and we'll be in a very different position for years and generations. One of the heads of states today said that he's afraid of the next winter. He's afraid of what's going to happen to the energy prices. Another head of state said, we have to take care about the household energy prices. This is the real responsibility of the governments today, of EU governments this year. So that the next winter is going to be a bit worse, even worse than the previous one was. So this is the reality where we are. So we really need to rethink or change our thinking, responding to today's challenges. And yes, for years, decades, generations, there was this idea that we can pursue the autocratic regimes, specifically Russia, to change their policies by doing a trade with them, by trying to, you know, to westernize or to, let me say, to civilize them in a way, keeping the relations, keeping the businesses, our foreign direct investments in Russia and in Belarus as well, in this part of the world. This is not leading us anywhere. This is leading us nowhere. This year is showing that we have to change our course. We have to be very strict that we are already hearing about the war fatigue in Europe. There's going to be sanctions fatigue coming. Yeah, before we go even any further with our sanctions. So yes, these are the real issues, because, as I said, this is a completely new world, completely new system, and we have to adapt it. We will be living this for longer years. So we are supporting the sanctions, obviously, against Russia. We think that we should go even further, sanctioning Russia, and we cannot start thinking about, you know, lifting the sanctions and relaxing the regime for Russia, because it's not only Putin, as we know. It's the society, the majority of the Russian society is supporting Putin. So we have to take this into consideration. So again, this will influence how we live, how we work, how we earn money. Perhaps we will not be earning money in Russia for long years, our corporations, our businesses, because this market decided, or the leaders of this market decided to go elsewhere. And it's not Europe, it's not our values, it's not the direction that we could accept. Thank you.
No, I just wanted to come back before it looks as if we are having totally different worldviews. When I say we need to look at open trade, rules-based, it doesn't mean we can choose all the sources, of course. We will be sourced from China. And let's not judge entire trade agreements through the lens of the Russian aggression in Europe. That's a very specific case. It's not even a large market for most EU countries. So and we will be dealing with regimes, as we have done in the past and in future, we don't like. That's the necessity of life. However, can we impose more? Can we demand more? Can we have greater conditionality? That's the big question. Secondly, before we walk the talk, we need to be able to ensure that we can diverge from the source. We don't necessarily have all that luxury, so that's the harsh reality too. With oil and gas, we will see it. How come we have not yet gone all the way? Because a lot of countries can't afford it, and we're not sure domestically if our population is prepared to pay the price. So I think sometimes in our political messaging, we have to know what we can achieve by when, so the narrative is consistent. And perhaps a second point, NATO, a president called it a few years ago as if it was comatose, correct? Now NATO, old system, but adjusted to the new reality big time because there was the political will to work with NATO. EU membership, you could argue, it's an old way of working. Why does everybody want to join the EU? But we made it happen. Big choices are made in crisis time. So I would be very careful to throw away the baby with the bathwater. We need to continuously ensure it's fit for purpose. The same with trade agreements, with the policies we choose, and the multilateral system, because it ain't all that bad. It brought wealth, it brought security, but we need to do more ourselves as member states. Invest the capital, have the political courage to stand by it, and reform what is required. Because if we can only do it in crisis time, that's good, but we need to be able to do it in peacetime even more, because that's the window of time we are given. So that's what I'd like to add.
On sanction fatigue.
I don't think, yeah. The one word on sanctions fatigue, because I think it's important. Let's be all clear here. We have not imposed any sanctions on oil and gas today on Russia. We have announced we will do something on oil in 6 months. Today, everything that's happening in the gas market, every single thing is restrictions of supply from Putin's side so that we don't build up a storage for the winter. So we went from 3 BCM per week, 3 billion cubic meters to 1 billion cubic meters of exports from Russia because they wanted it. And we are not ready, we are not responding. And I am really depressed about hearing, indeed, as you said, sanctions fatigue, etc., before we have put any sanctions. Our voters think, because we have been selling wrongly that we are doing a lot on sanctions, our voters think that the gas and oil prices are our fault. And right now, the only thing that is happening on the gas market is that Putin is pulling without us doing anything. When the COVID happened, we took our destiny in our own hands. By this time, COVID was at the same time as the war, okay? By this time, 2 years ago, we had almost the RRF in place, we had the vaccine joint purchasing, etc. By this time, with the energy, we have exactly zero. No joint purchasing platform, no joint instrument, nothing at all.
No, I certainly, to come back to what you're saying, Putin, NATO was in a coma for many of us, but Putin gave to NATO a big electroshock.
We took
and
it,
now it's
and we delivered.
And I hope that we'll do the same in the European Union, because I think that Putin could act as a new founding father of a new union, but we have to reform the union.
That's
unexpected founding father, but I think that we should seize this opportunity, especially of Ukrainian enlargement, to engage also on a fundamental, on some key issues, treaty reform. But I know where my heart beats, Luis, but don't worry. I come back to the second topics, which is the challenge of innovation, challenge on competitiveness, challenge on skills. Europe is lagging behind the innovation race, is lagging behind the technological race. Out of the 50 most advanced universities, only 4 are European, and we have in general a very bad record in terms of competitive innovation. My question is twofold. First, what should we do? Should we focus more on competitiveness strategy? Should we focus more on skills? Should we focus more on education and training? Is it also a matter of investment, private investment, also public investment? Do we need a new state aid policy to promote this? And then there are also very good stories, at least one, a very good story coming from the Netherlands, ASML, which is the world leader in manufacturing photolithography machine. Now, don't pretend that you all know what are photolithography machine. At least I didn't know. I learned that this is key to produce microchips. And I learned that tech giant like Samsung or Intel today depends on SML machine, on machine made in Europe, on machine made in the Netherlands. Is this a good success story that we can promote? Of course, I start from the representative of the Dutch government, please.
Well, I'm here as leader of D66, huh?
Yeah.
To be clear.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
For the leader of
I'm
D66,
also a Minister of
leader
Finance, but this
Minister of Finance and Deputy
the Dutch
Prime
government is not a member of Renew, as far as I know. Be good, but they're not.
Okay.
We'd have more seats in Parliament, you see. No, I think it's you raised a number of suggestions, and I think we need all of them. Yes, ASML is a formidable story. We're all proud of it, but it was spun off out of Philips. I don't have the details to fact check if at one stage there was also a subsidy or another type of support given. I don't think so. I think it was an offshoot. They started it. Super creative people, leveraged private investments. But what was important was an ecosystem around it. It was called Brainport Brabant, the university, the power and access to technology of a larger mother company. Very bright people. They attracted also the best and brightest from around the world. So it tells you something about attracting talent and retaining talent. But the deeper cycle is we need to invest significantly more in R&D. We need to retain and attract the people that want to work in that field. So you need to also look at the fiscal space, and you need to look at the enabling environment. But is the European market big enough? Doesn't have to be, provided you want to become a global leader. From the Netherlands, we generally don't think that state aid is the right way forward. What I think is interesting, where you have more cross-European, cross-border collaboration, so the best minds meet around areas of strategic investment that benefit a larger number of countries. Because very often, you know it, there's University A that has the best brains on a certain topic, University B in another country. So fostering and encouraging universities within the union to co-produce and then not be so tight around, well, there's intellectual property, of course, but beyond that, what you do with the yields, I think there we can do much more. Then, of course, you touch the heart of industrial policy. And that's a big question. We are not in favor, the Netherlands so far, historically, and currently we're not in favor of big state champions. We've gone way beyond that stage. We believe in free and open competition. But we do need to secure, from a security perspective as well, we need to secure and protect the types of investments that are made so they're not subject to a hostile foreign takeover of, let's say, a number of countries that actually might be infringing on our sovereignty and security in future. I think that's a fine line.
Okay, I thank you, the leader of D66, and now
yeah, I have to say that.
And now the head of delegation of Ciudadanos in Renew Group, please.
Thank you. So, I agree with Minister Cajal, with Sigrid D66.
Sigrid is the easiest.
Sigrid is the easiest. Very, very much. I think that, I mean, in this kind of mess of COVID and in the state intervention, etc., we are forgetting our liberal values sometimes. And I think ASML is a beautiful case that reminds you that what we have always kind of believed in is what you need for success, which is talent, R&D, a competitive environment, and a country that is a good business environment. And that it's not all about state champions and state aid, etc. In fact, I fear that this reduction in the controls of state aid at the European level might, in fact, asphyxiate, because there are some countries that have a lot of money to spend in state aid and that are going to freely distribute it and help their champions, and that's going to actually kill the future ASMLs that we don't know that might be in some little country and that would benefit from a competitive market. So my view is that these type of examples remind us that Facebook or Google or Microsoft or whichever company, successful company you want to think about in the technology field, does not exist because some bureaucrat in an office, how can it even be conceived, right? That the bureaucrat in office decide this is the future. How can they know? I mean, nobody knows, not even a company, just they compete And somebody was successful and got an idea that was successful, but nobody can know it in advance. So I think that this reminds us, this case, the biggest technology company in Europe, one of the biggest in the world now by market cap, reminds us that we shouldn't, here I pick up on Sigrid's expression, don't throw the baby with the bathwater. We shouldn't throw the baby of competition with all this bathwater of all this COVID and state intervention in all the economy.
Thank you, Luis. Misha, what is your perspective, and also looking at the Polish Recovery Fund and the prospect of digital innovation, is it possible to conceive tomorrow a Polish ASML, in your view?
Not so fast, I would say, very briefly. Thanks for this question, and also, referring to Poland's recovery fund, which is a bit problematic issue, as all of us know. Some of us know even better than others about this issue. Yes, the fund for Poland was not launched yet, and we are together with our dear friends from Hungary, the only countries who are not actually using this money or not being able to use this money.
We haven't submitted yet.
Sorry?
In all fairness, we haven't submitted our plan yet. We abstained, as you know, on the vote, but we haven't submitted our plan.
Very aware of that. Yeah. So as we know, our position simply is that Poland deserves this money and needs this money very badly. So this is then not the money for the government of Poland. This is the money for the population, for the people of Poland, and for the generations, actually. This is why the money has to be spent in a smart way and actually mainly using this money to fund green projects and the digital project, or the process of digitalization of the country. So we hope that the fund will be launched and initiated pretty soon for Poland, as soon as Polish government is meeting the expectations or obligations that agreed to fulfill regarding the Polish judiciary reform, this time in a proper direction, in the right direction. So that's our point number one. Point number two, look, we were looking very closely at the Poland's recovery fund, looking on the sources, on places where this money, this fund can be really used to transform the country and to also to use it to introduce kind of a digital revolution. And it's not so much, it's not so good, I would say, because Polish government decided that slightly over 20% of the fund itself would be spent on digitalization processes in the country, and the needs, they are huge in the country, and it's not only about securing, supplying the equal access to the fast 5G network for the citizens or the SMEs. These are huge expectations and huge needs in many areas of Poland, and we just don't see that the Polish government is really ambitious in running to realize it, to completing these goals. For example, we see a good example there in the Poland's Recovery Fund, the idea to introduce, to start the private, or support the private electric bus production in Poland. Once upon a time, a few years ago, this conservative government of Poland had a great, or so-called great idea, that they would start the production of electric cars in Poland. State-sponsored electric car producer aiming to produce as many as 1 million electric cars in Poland. And this went nowhere, actually. There is not a single electric car was produced, and actually the facility is in the early I would say early adoption, or early days of the preparations to start the production. So we need to take these lessons, learn these lessons, and there are some good ideas, really good ideas in a plan. So we are not criticizing the whole idea and the number of ideas in a recovery fund for Poland, but we will be looking very closely. Specifically, we'll be looking very closely for all the investments related to the green transformation of the country. As you may know, Poland is somewhere there, one of the last countries depending on the coal when it comes to the generation of power. of electric power, and this is a serious problem for our country. We are supporting the development of the renewables, but we also want to express our support for the nuclear energy, specifically for the new technologies, for the small reactors, which are somewhere on the way. As you may know, Poland has no nuclear energy at all today, and we believe since we are late, we may jump into the newest technology, which will be present and available pretty soon. And we believe that the Poland Recovery Fund should be used also to support that kinds of projects, because our dependency on coal is becoming to be really not only costly but dangerous for the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Michal. I think they are not telling me anything, so I think and I hope we have a few minutes for questions from the audience. So I don't know if there is anybody who has got question. No? Everything is clear? Well, if everything is clear, I think that you have been excellent, and let me resume your clearness. You won't be selective. There was a question. So, I don't see you.
It's just too dark.
Yeah. But I think that someone should give you a microphone. Yeah, okay, please.
So, first of all, I want to thank you all for sharing your opinion with us. I would like to ask this question for each one of you. Today, we saw that the COVID-19 and the war started by Putin in Ukraine made the European citizens realize that European Union still have a powerful position in the geopolitics game field. So, do you think that the European Union works better or stronger under the crisis pressure?
So we need a crisis to go ahead?
Well, that would be sad, because if you look at the cost of the loss of lives and human suffering, I would hate to think we can only perform under extreme pressure. It's a fact that in many cases, the most difficult decisions are taken only when there is sufficient pressure. But that's why I said we need to have the political will, particularly in peacetime, to do the right thing. And that requires stamina, political courage, but also steadfastness. And that's for all of us to take home and act upon.
Please?
So I actually have a very different view about the first and the second crisis. If you think of the 2 years ago, COVID, that's February, March. The crisis, the invasion of Ukraine is February, end of February, early March, same timing. By now, the European Union had a really powerful response. We had the joint purchasing, we had all of these other things that we mentioned before. We don't really have, honestly, anything. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm talking in front of Sigrid, not the Minister Kach. So I think this has been a massive disappointment. So I'm sorry to say it, but in terms of, I know it's very hard, okay, but we had a lot of leadership. We did something really, really hard. In my entire life, I honestly didn't think that in these years we would see debt issuance by the European Union together. And I mean, Sandro and many others, me and many others can tell you how all this went. And this was stunning, right? In a few months, people who said never, ever will we issue debt together, suddenly agreed. We had resolutions, we had decisions, we had negotiations in council, and we had this enormous sea change. I mean, I wanted to ask you one thing that Europe has done to deal with this incoming earthquake of an energy crisis. This is going to be a disaster for our winter. And it's announced, and we've been all seeing it, and we've been all saying it, and it's all national solutions, it's all people subsidizing demand. I mean, sorry, I'm not going to say what I think. So it all doesn't make any sense. In fact, it's actually making things worse. So I think the situation from 2 years ago, crisis, Europe goes up, really responds, amazing, all stand, we are all very proud, and today is sharply different in my view.
I agree. I think that, again, the health crisis, we have thought the unthinkable and made the impossible, but it shouldn't be an exception. This should be the European Union that you want to face all of the current challenges, and we don't see, at least I don't see, the same awareness and the same strong will, and we have to work as Renew to increase the strong will to think the unthinkable and make the impossible. Michel.
Well, today is a great day, obviously, for Ukraine here, for Moldova, and also for Georgia. I will ask the question, would this be possible, what is happening today in Brussels, if this war didn't start 4 months ago? I mean, the answer is pretty clear. So, answering to your question about the crises coming to European Union, I would say the bigger crisis, the better for the development of the European projects. And this is not this year, this is the decades of the development of the European projects, that this project is being really changed, upgraded, updated, or has a chance, at least, to be updated and upgraded once the next crisis comes. I don't know how strongly this war, this situation, this energy crisis that we are having today will influence the way that EU operates. We have this discussion actually starting about, about the right to veto the European decisions by a single country, whether this should be in place. Obviously, this is, opening the treaties and this never-ending story that might take years or long years to change. But without crises, Europe would not develop, would not go any further. So the European project is far from being complete. That's pretty obvious from us. And I'm not talking about the United States of Europe. I'm talking about the European Union that would be enlarged, definitely. Also, the impact of the war in Ukraine on our thinking should be that the bigger Europe is, the better for all of us, or the safer we should feel on a continent. But we should think about how to improve the way the Europe operates, the EU institutions operate from what we have today, what we see, and still these institutions, far from being perfect, were still able to introduce sanctions, even though some of them, or the crucial ones, are not in a place yet, are not operating yet. But we need to think about how should we change Europe, and it's not the conference on the future of Europe, it's the real talking and discussing the changes which will be in need. And we will be happy to be part of this discussion because there are lots of ideas. Also, the Conference of the Future of Europe showed that there are lots of good ideas. It's just, you just need to be a brave politician to start implementing them. Thank you.
Thank you, Michel. You mentioned, and we conclude, you mentioned the issue of the veto. I mean, to tackle the issue of the veto, we have to revise the treaty. And the annoying part is that we as Renew Europe, we have pushed and we brought the Parliament to trigger the procedure to revise the treaty and to get rid of veto, but the Council has ignored this. And I think that I put this as a point, a question mark, what shall we do now? As the Council has ignored the fact that we have triggered the treaty revision under Article 48, matter for food for thought, Luis, for our group meeting, but also need for action for the European Parliament, because otherwise we will never reach the goal that you mentioned, being effective. That's what you say. You want the EU to be effective. The moment where we open with a major geopolitical choice, and we give to the enlargement a geopolitical meaning by saying to Ukraine, to Moldova, also in a different way to Georgia, that, I mean, the enlargement is open for them, for these two countries, and in a perspective for Georgia, we need to be more effective. Today, we are not effective enough. And we succeed. And there is the first Orban that passes around can block us. And this is what we need. We need to move. I think that really 1 minute.
I just want to have just mirror something that, I mean, I'm in agreement, but at the same time, don't forget, too many crises most people can't handle. And they opt out. So whilst our talk is lofty and the direction of travel may be clear and desirable, you also need to allow for enough time for people to feel the actual benefits, peace benefits, and believe that this brings prosperity as opposed to only in crisis because the decision-making can be amended. That's a political calculation, but not one that ordinary citizens have much to gain by. And that's something one should never forget.
Yeah,
It's just that we do not have always the influence on the crises, whether they come and what kind of...
It's right, but we have the influence of our internal reform. I think that two crises at a time is difficult, but accompanying two new reform processes at a time is necessary. Like we should, as we enlarge, we also reform. We are at the end of this I think, very good panel. I thank you very much to our three speakers. If I have to give you 6 key words around 2 issues, they ask us to be more selective, more assertive, and go on with an approach on rule-based, facing the challenge of global trade. And they ask us to promote cross-border cooperation, transnational cooperation, to go for production, and to reform the European Union to win the challenge of innovation. Thank you very much to you all three.
Renew Europe is at the forefront of defending our common European values of democracy, the rule of law, and fundamental rights. Values, more than anything, are at the very heart of the EU citizenship and the DNA of European identity. The protection and promotion of citizens' rights and freedoms remains at the core of our political agenda, now more than ever before.
I don't have a mic. Okay, I'll repeat that. Hello, everybody. I have a mic now, but I cannot see you, but I know there's a very good audience there. Yes, thank you. I'm very pleased and honored to have been asked to chair this particular panel because I think us liberals, we come in various shapes and sizes. There are progressive liberals, conservative liberals, left-wing, right-wing, Nordic liberals, southern liberals, liberals who don't call themselves liberals, federalist liberals, and intergovernmental liberals, and many other kinds in between. So, and we differ on various issues, but there's one topic that we all agree on, and that is values and particularly the rule of law. So this is going to be a very short panel. We'll all agree and then we go home. No. What I would like to use this half hour for is to see how we can more effectively turn the European Union really into a community of values and a rules-based, a rule of law-based club. Because I think there we still have a lot of ground to gain, and I think we as liberals in the broadest sense of the word, we should also do a little bit of soul searching on, you know, we agree on the goal, but we don't necessarily agree on how to get there. So I hope this is also going to be a slightly provocative round. And, but I have here a fantastic panel. To my left, Lina Nordqvist from Liberalerna in Sweden, an MP and member of the board. Then Beate Meinol-Reisinger, who is the chairwoman but also parliamentary leader of NEOS in Austria, and you're tomorrow, I believe, or next week, celebrating tomorrow your 10th birthday, well, NEOS, that is. And then finally, Ferenc Gelencsher, I hope I pronounced that correctly, need to brush up my Hungarian, leader of Momentum in Hungary. And of course, for you, the rule of law is a very important topic. But I'm going to start with Lina here, because Lina will have to leave a little bit earlier because she has a flight to catch. And as you know, the program has been overrunning a little bit. Lina, I'm going to start with you and fairly, maybe the most provocative question. I think if I look at the reluctance of the European Union, that is not the European Parliament, but the Council in particular, and also the Commission, to actually enforce the values, to enforce Article 2 of the treaties, that has something to do with the way that we have organized European governance. It has something to do with the vision we have of Europe. I think, and this is let's say my challenge to you, that intergovernmental Europe is very badly equipped to actually enforce the rule of law standards across the European Union. So, as a liberal family, shouldn't we have this debate on, is the European Union a political entity, or is it just technocratic and intergovernmental? And if it is, then are we actually able to enforce those standards?
You thought that was provocative?
I was trying to be provocative in a diplomatic way, but
okay,
we're just warming
you
up.
You succeeded to be diplomatic. No, but like you said when you started this session, we all agree, all of us liberals, no matter what colours the wings of the butterfly has, we agree that every person must be entitled to shape their own future, and every country must be entitled to shape its own future. And then it must be, in my mind, and my party's perspective at least, it must be totally clear that when those rules are breached, there must be consequences. And as you might know, my homeland is Sweden, and we have the presidency next year. And my party, we're pushing that the rule of law and democracy must be in our full focus during our presidency, just because of that. Because we cannot, like you say, we cannot say that we want something, we cannot say that we have visions, and then not take the responsibility, the full responsibility of making sure that when our visions, when our common ground, when the laws that we form together and voted for together, when they're breached, there must be consequences. It's not harder than that.
Okay, of course I couldn't agree more, but then I'll go to Beate and make it a bit more specific then, because we see that in the Council they have almost unanimously decided to give the green light to funding to Poland, even if the conditions haven't been met. Almost unanimously, only the Netherlands abstained. But that means that also our liberal friends in the Council have also endorsed that. So this is a challenge for us. Can you say a little bit, you're not in government, of course, but how are we as a liberal family going to tackle that issue? There seems to be a kind of disconnect between the liberals, the Renew group in Parliament, partly also in the Commission, but then when it comes to the European Council, then values don't seem to count so much anymore.
Well, thank you very much for having me here on this panel, and thank you for the question. As a member of parliament, it would be easy to say that the problem is always the council, which is maybe the most provocative thing to say here. But of course, there is a much more lively debate and a more colored debate and less political in a way in the parliament and as in the council. But well, I have to say something about it. We totally agree that we are based on these core values. We, like us liberals, but us also as a European Union. But it's not so easy to determine when these values are breached. It is probably easy for me as an opposition leader in our Austrian parliament to say, if the government continues with public advertising in millions of amount of millions of euros with the Austrian media, this breaches the freedom or the value of freedom of press, because they're like, yeah, in a way. But would you say this is in breach of the contract? Is this really an obstruction of freedom of press, like compared to the situation in Hungary? So what I want to say is it's not so easy to determine when you have a breach of the values. Therefore, it is crucial, in my point of view, to have an institutionalized process to determine what is a serious breach. And therefore, the court of the European Court is very important here in this whole procedure of determining when a breach has been done. But of course, unanimity is always a problem, I would say. And we also need a reform of the European Union in this respect.
But before I come to Ferenc, very concretely, do you think that the European Council was right in giving the green light, well, and the Commission before that, giving the green light to release funding to Poland?
Well, actually, as liberals, also in Austria, would be far more strict and determined on the fact that rules have to be, like, you have to keep to the values and to the rules, because if you don't stick to the rules, why should you ask people to stick to the rules? Why, like, in a way, you cannot do cherry picking. I'm very determined on that. You cannot have everything, get all the money out of the European Union, like also in Hungary, have a very much corrupt system, and then whenever you have the opportunity, stand on the stage and, break all the values that we are based on. So I think we would have been far more strict on that.
Yes. Ferenc, what is it going to mean for you and for Momentum and your fight for the rule of law and against corruption and against autocrats, kleptocrats, if the payments to Poland are made without the criteria having been met? In other words, if the Polish government is allowed to continue to destroy the rule of law and they still get their payments, what does it mean for you? Do you feel that it weakens your hand?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. Well, Ms. Meinl-Reisinger pretty much said everything, but to answer your question, of course it's going to weaken our hand. If Poland is to get their money, all of Hungarians will see that chances are we're going to have our money too, without agreeing to the conditions. But there's something really important I have to say. We're talking about the rule of law, which is extremely important to all of us liberals. But where are we talking about it? In Brussels, in Western Europe. It was either Plato or Aristotle who said that until you are hungry, until you get your stomach full, you cannot really think about anything else, just to get your stomach full. So in order to, for the people to realize in Hungary how important it is to live in a country which follow the rules and in which there is a plural media, first of all, these people have to be way more better off. They need to be more wealthy. I mean, as long as you're hungry, as long as you're pretty much poor, I mean, in an EU standard level, 60% of Hungarian population considered to be poor, and when your main problem is to have your kids fed and have your kids get lunch, thinking about the importance of rule of law becomes a secondary issue, and that's a huge problem.
Yeah. Unless they understand that having a kleptocrat for a government leader has something to do with the standard of living being low. Lina?
Yes. Excuse me for being a bit philosophical here, but I'm thinking this is in a way a discussion of is the glass half full or half empty. We're not talking about expelling a country. We're not talking about saying you are no longer entitled to be part of this union. What we're saying is, or at least I'm saying, and that I hear that many of us are saying, is that the European Union is a cooperation. It's not a cash machine. We do things together, and when we do things together, we also share part of our money together. we do many things together. But if we choose not to do things together that we've decided, we've promised to take care of our inhabitants, to have respect for minorities, to make sure to push LGBT rights forward and create something better for our children and grandchildren. If that's not respected, then that means, well, why should we be able to have part of it? Like you said, well, this cherry picking is not okay, because it's not a question of throwing a country into jail. It's a question of saying that these things come together. And if you don't follow every part of it, then you cannot say on your own that I want to have that and that and that, please, but I prefer not to do the rest. It's not okay. And I don't think that's too complicated even. I think I could explain it to my children. We have a conditionality mechanism now. We need to use it. We need to enforce it when needed to make sure that every inhabitant in this union get the life they deserve and the future that they're entitled to. Thanks.
I have a lot of conditionality mechanism with my children. I need to enforce them, I think. No, but can I pick something up that you said? Because you said very rightly that you need to feed the people first. People need to feed their children, and then they think about the rule of law and all our values. Yes, but it's not about the values because they are values. We believe in these values, and we base the whole European Union on these values because we are sure, and we managed to show over the last decades that a society and also like a state or the European Union based on these values is the only form capable of delivering personal freedom and prosperity. Of course, we're challenged on this subject now, when it comes to China, for example, yeah? When it comes to other, like, illiberal, but wealthy and growing economies. But we've shown over the last decades that the Western societies that are mainly based on these democratic values not offer the most personal freedom. China cannot offer the most personal freedoms. I mean, people are leaving China because of that. Yeah? It's not attractive to work there. I mean, for some, yes, but if you could choose, I'm not sure. And to deliver wealth, not only for a kleptocratic elite, but for all the people. And that's why we base the European Union on these values. And I think we have to be very, very strict on that, because in a way, this is the narrative also of Putin, saying, yeah, this is this degenerated West, believing in some awkward values, but not being able to deliver what the people really need. So I would be a little bit more, cautious to use this argument, but to be more offensive when it comes to really fighting for these values, yes.
No, I entirely agree. And I think the funny thing is that I've been fighting for fundamental rights for many years, and people would say, oh, that's also abstract and academic and theoretical, until COVID struck. And then suddenly people realized what freedom means. Freedom of movement, or the right to have a family and a private life. You know, all these freedoms, the freedom to demonstrate, freedom of expression, all these freedoms suddenly mattered and they became tangible. And then with regard to, I entirely agree with you that, you know, we should not accept this narrative that they are sort of Western values. If you're talking about degenerate, I'm just thinking of the previous American president and his values and his attitude to the rule of law. That shows that, you know, there is no monopoly on either system. Ferenc.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I may. So it seems like I've articulated myself completely badly. I totally agree with you on this issue. The thing is, I'm 31 years old. Of course I agree with you. But my parents, they were raised in a system, they were born and raised in a system in which there was no rule of law. I mean, I was born into it. For me, it's natural, like breathing air. But for my parents, it's something that they don't completely understand. For my parents' generation, I mean. What I do believe is extremely important for the people to better understand why rule of law is important is education. The compulsory educational level, the age level in Hungary is now 16. I mean, imagine being 16 years old, basically a kid, and telling you that, okay, there you go have a work. What kind of job you gonna get? Orban pretty much turned Hungary into an assembly plant, and well, chances are, if you work in a factory, in an assembly plant, then again, you don't. Your income is not high enough to have your kids fed, and therefore we are back to my previous argument. So I didn't mean to. I completely agree with you. The problem is that in the previous 12 years, our prime minister, or I would say Hungary's prime minister, because he's not my prime minister, pretty much demolished everything that the previous generation was fighting for when they were fighting against communism in Hungary.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Although I have to say, I also meet a lot of people in Central and Eastern European countries who are probably a lot more acutely aware of the value of freedom and democracy than people in my country who take it for granted. But now coming to, okay, I'm going to try and connect two things here. One is the issue of enlargement, which is very high on the agenda. I happen to be one of those who is delighted that we are having this long-term perspective, not just for the people of Ukraine or Moldova or the others, but also for all of us. I think it's going to make Europe stronger, but it also underscores the need to strengthen Europe as a community of values and a community of law. So it brings me back to my initial question. How are we going to make sure that the Council in particular, but the Commission will also come on board? Because we will need them in order to ensure, to enforce all those standards across Europe. Can I start with Lina? Because you have to leave in 5 minutes.
I can speak moonwalking backwards. I think, actually, I don't think that we can make a law or a rule about this. I don't think that's enough. I think then we're going to end up with a gardening magazine. It's going to look very nice and it's not going to work, and the garden's still going to look like my garden. Not nice. I think what we need to do is again and again and again remind ourselves and each other and our colleagues that the European Union was not created for being easy, for being comfortable. It was created because it's absolutely needed, and the alternative is unthinkable. We cannot afford not to be a union and not to stick together. And that, I think, I'm sure there are rules and details that also are needed, but without that, it's still just going to be a gardening magazine, I think. I need to go, but thank you so much for making me feel like this is my birthday. Thank you.
Well, happy birthday. Okay, Beata.
Yeah, my thoughts on that. Well, first of all, I must say that today is really a day of joy. I really must say that because we had so many bad news over the last month and years, and I really want to stick to the point that I said today, hopefully, we are going to celebrate, because I think what we see is that it's still attractive. There are a lot of problems, and we are facing a lot of problems. Inflation, rising prices, rising energy prices, probably really deep economic troubles. And of course, rising left and right-wing, far right-wing populists that really attack also all the parties that are in the center and protecting exactly those values. But today is a day of joy. So we are attractive as European Union. There are countries that want to join the European Union because they share our values, because they want to have a prosperous country and to protect themselves from aggressive behavior and war from Putin or, Vladimir Putin. I think, as you said, it's not about being kind to Ukraine or being kind to Moldova. Don't say that. It's about selfishness of the European Union. We grow stronger and better, hopefully, as a geopolitical power And with the strategic autonomy, I think there will be a discussion on that afterwards. But for that, we need to have a reform on all these procedures that are, I know people are not interested in the procedures, they don't know the procedures, they are not interested in the procedures, but we have to reform the procedures in order to get these stronger geopolitical power and also strategic autonomy that we so deeply need. And for that, of course, we have to skip unanimity in the Council. It's not working. We cannot agree. We hardly can agree with 27 members. So how should we agree on really like geopolitical issues, defensive policy issues, the green agenda, how to tackle energy crisis, whatever, with a growing number of members. So we have to push not only forward when it comes to enlargement, and please don't forget the Western Balkans. Here is very important, not only for Austria, but also for European Union, because China is already there, Russia is already there. If European Union is not there, then we will have a destabilized region. And for too long, the Western Balkan countries got the carrot in front of their nose, but no real perspective of joining the European Union. But yes, enlargement, but also deepening in form of reform. So we have to start it immediately.
Ferenc.
I have a personal story. When I was 11 years old, that was the first time I went abroad with my family. We went to Spain. And at the Austrian border, we weren't EU member states back then. And at the Austrian border, we were stopped by border patrols, soldiers, German shepherds. It was scary for a kid. And 10 years later, I had the chance to work in Brussels. I had the chance to study in Paris. The world has changed. The world opened up for me. I entered to a Europe without borders. And I don't mean to offend anybody here, but Europe is the best place in Earth. And of course, I'm all into enlargement. But before we enlarge the EU, we have to answer a very serious question. And this whole panel is about this. Is the European Union a community based on values? I do hope it is. Or is this an economic area? Because back in the day, after the World War II, after the Second World War, the main reason to create the European Union was to avoid the war between France and Germany. So they tried to connect these two economics. Ever since, it's becoming more and more of a value-based community. We really need to how do you say it in English? Oh my God. To force it, yes, thank you very much. To force these value-based community. Otherwise, it's only going to be an economic community, which does not have a solid basic. Back to the rule of law, if you might let me. When you condition someone or something, even a state, you can use the stick or the carrot. And so far, the EU only used the carrot in regard of Hungary. So even though I'm Hungarian and I do really want to have the EU funds to arrive to Hungary, it's due time that the European Union start using the stick.
Yeah. Well, with regard to the money, it was our group who put forward the proposal for what we call smart conditionality. In other words, in the case of Poland, for example, we can give financial support to Poland, but not to the government, but to the beneficiaries directly. The funds should then be managed by the European Commission, but the Commission is extremely reluctant to do this. But coming back to the issue of enlargement, how to preserve, how to uphold the rule of law and our values, and the need for reforms, because I heard Beata say, and I hear this a lot, in particular in our family as well, saying, well, we shouldn't be talking about institutional reforms because people think it's boring. But I actually think, no, but I'm exaggerating a little bit, but this is what people very often say. But I think it's a dangerous argument, because the way that we have organized governance in Europe determines the outcome, determines our ability to uphold the values. And I have the feeling, and I've been working a lot on the rule of law and values, I feel that we are, we're coming to a point where it's, it's like the famous crossroads that we're always at. But this time it's true, because if even our own leaders say, well, we're a community of values, but when push comes to shove, we're not willing to actually put our money where our mouth is, quite literally, because we don't want to cross one government or another, because next time we'll need them for, like in this case, for example, where the Polish government got the green light for the funding so that they would give up their veto on something else, some tax measure. I mean, if we continue down that road, including in our own family, then it becomes, we lose credibility and we lose moral authority, including towards the countries that we would like to join the European Union. So we have like a few minutes left. So I'm going to ask you to both react to this. So shouldn't we then, as a political family, be willing to take that next step and say, but we need institutional reforms in order to act like a political union rather than a technocratic market?
Precisely. When in Rome, act like a Roman. That's the main thing that Mr. Orban always forgets. We really do need institutional reforms. What I do hope for is that we're going to have more EU and less nation state. Imagine if the compulsory educational age level was set by the EU, not by the member state, then again, we wouldn't have Hungarians leaving school at the age of 16. We need more people. We need to make the people of Europe realize that the European Union is not something abstract, it's them. We are the European Union, you and me, our countries, our cities, everything within. I do believe that whenever a youngster is given a chance to study abroad, for example, study via Erasmus, that's a life-changing event. So we really need to make it much easier and support students more to have the chance to travel and live and study abroad, to get to know each other and get to know Europe better. Because when I was studying in Paris, I realized that I have much more in common with with the Danish or Swedish at my age than with my parents, and it was strange to realize it.
Yes, Beata.
No, we definitely need institutional reforms and a reform of the procedures. So we have to work on that. The thing is, and probably you're right and I was wrong, people are interested in, because there was a big debate, the hugest participative process that took place for the reform of Europe. And in fact, you're right, people talked also about the reform of the institution. Why? Because what they see is deals, like you said. I agree on giving the funds for Poland, and then Poland gives up a veto on another thing. So they see that there are deals made, but partially they don't know why. And the other thing is they see that there is a blockade, that out of selfishness and nationalism, important projects for the people of Europe, because people of Europe want a Europe that delivers. And we have to be honest, Europe didn't deliver. In the migration crisis, we didn't deliver. So far, we are on the way, we didn't deliver when it comes to tackling climate change. We didn't deliver on prosperity, for wealth for everybody. We didn't deliver on equality. We didn't deliver on defending our democracies, not even institutionalized, not our own democracies. We didn't deliver to promote our values into the world. So, of course, people want a Europe that is able to deliver, and they see that there is a blockade taking place by the member states out of selfishness and nationalism. So we have to do it, and we have to do it immediately, the institutional reforms. But still, I think we have to win over the hearts of the people in the center of societies. And I'm not sure if it is easy with the institutional reform dialogue. We have now an immense chance. I mean, war is never a chance. This is cynical if I say that. But now we totally clear that it's not possible to have a future with Russia in the near future. There is none. The party is over. There will be no gas delivery soon. There will be no oil delivery soon. There will be no trade. And there is no perspective other than the European perspective. With the enlargement process, with now Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, Western Balkan countries hopefully willing to join the European Union, we have a chance here to win over the debate in the center, because the nationalistic approach, the approach that blames Brussels, blames technocrats, that blames whatever, that doesn't come out of the extreme left or extreme right. My thesis is that these narratives, they exist in the center, in the very center of societies. And then populist new movements from left to right, they like pick it up selectively, driven by Russian disinformation campaigns and funding of far-right media and blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly we wake up and have a problem. So yes, institutional reform, yes, but also building a liberal, centered approach narrative that touches the heart of people.
Very good. Okay, we may have 1 minute left for a question. I can't really, yes, I see people a little bit. Is there anybody in the, there's light. Is there anybody who would like to ask one question? No, everything is crystal clear and everybody agrees. Or is just waiting for the coffee break. Either way. Okay, that brings us to the end of this panel then. I would like to thank you very much for this debate. And I think we could have discussed for much longer, but I hope that also in our family and not just in the group in the European Parliament, we're going to elaborate ways to really uphold our values in practice, not just in our narrative, not just words, but also how are we going to make sure that the European Union delivers also on values. And I would like to conclude by reminding people, when I say also on values, it sounds like a little bit of, you know, a nice extra, but I'd like to remind people that the values are laid down in Article 2 of the treaties. Article 2 is by far the most important article in the treaties. It's not Article 1, because Article 1 says, hi everybody. Article 2 is about the values. Everything else, internal market, transports, agriculture, everything else comes after. And for all the other aspects, we have created instruments that are effective, except for Article 2. We still find it very difficult to actually put it into practice and make it a reality for people on the ground. So I hope that we are going to work on this as a liberal family, liberal and Democrat family, to turn this into a reality. Thank you very much, Beate, Ferenc, and thank you for your attention and your patience.
The multilateral order is under significant pressure. The EU needs therefore to manage interdependencies in trade and critical supplies, and reframing strategic partnerships in security and defense. How should Renew Europe respond to these challenges and turn them into opportunities?
Hello, everybody. Before starting with the last panel, I would like to ask everybody to stand up. Please stand up. And please raise your hands. Okay, now we can start. So, in our panel, we will discuss about the European sovereignty. And so we have 3 panelists. Thierry Breton, he's the European Commissioner for the Internal Market. Before the Commission, he was the CEO of the French technology company Atos. He also served as the French Minister for Economy, Finance and Industry, as well as CEO of France Telecom and Thomson Multimedia. Thierry was also a professor at Harvard University. Welcome. Inés Arrimadas is a Spanish lawyer and politician serving as member of the Congress of Deputies and spokesperson of Citizens Party in the Congress. She was previously the leader of the regional branch of the party in Catalonia. In March 2020, she was voted for party leader. Welcome. And Carlo Calenda is an Italian business executive and a politician, leader of the Azione party. Carlo is a member of the European Parliament. Before, he was a Minister of Economic Development in the Matteo Renzi and Paolo Gentileoni's government in Italy. He has also served as Italy's permanent representative to the European Union. So, quite often when people are talking about sovereignty and technological sovereignty, then other people, they think, I know, this is about protectionism. So when talking about sovereignty, they are talking about protectionism. So now, when talking about sovereignty, all the people, they are thinking about gas supplies, oil supplies, about coal, energy dependence, and so on, which is truth. This is about sovereignty. But I would like to begin with Thierry Breton and to discuss about our CHIPS Act. This is also about our sovereignty, about our technological sovereignty. We know where we are right now, and this picture is not so nice for Europe. As we all know, 60% of chips in the world, they are produced in Taiwan, 20% in South Korea, 10% in the European Union, but those 10%, they are pretty old-fashioned chips, 22 nanometers chips, and in South Korea and Taiwan, they are producing 5 nanometers chips. So our share in GDP, global share in GDP is 23%, with chips only 10%, and depending heavily from Asian countries and also from the United States, because all the patents practically are owned by the United States. So now we would like to increase our share from 10% to 20%. Thierry, how we will do that? I would like to say, sorry, I have to apologize because Thierry has to leave at 5 o'clock, and I believe he will be able to deal with this CHIPS Act also, but go ahead, please.
So this was my answer. I've been very happy to be with you, and I have to leave. No. So maybe I will a little bit slightly later to try to answer to this very wide question. First, I would like to tell you hello to everyone, but I don't like the word sovereignty. I don't like it. Because sovereignty means something totally different in every single European country. In Spain, it means something. In Italy, something else. In France, believe me, souveraineté, ça veut dire alors beaucoup de choses. In Estonia, something else. In Germany, something else. So I don't use it personally. and I don't want to put a name behind. Just our goal is to make sure that our continent, Europe, with the 27 member states, can continue to work whatever happens in our world. Because we all know that, you had the previous panel, we are entering into a very, very bumpy time. And by the way, this will be a time where if you belong to a continent, you may find your way. If you are a single country, it's much more complex. But this being said, that's why I prefer to say, well, we need to make sure that for our critical supplies, we can manage our environment. You mentioned energy. We see it, of course. Today, we are not self-sufficient. And by the way, but let's be frank, you had the previous panel. We are today, for I don't know how long, in the hands of Putin. That's the way. So we need, of course, very quickly to retrieve our autonomy, independence, capacity to decide ourselves, sovereignty, call it the way you want. But it's true also for semiconductors, another kind of new oil. In other words, today, if you don't have energy, we will have to close some factories. If we don't have semiconductors, we will have to close probably all our factories. That's a fact. So, you mentioned, Andrew, something very important. Today, 60% of the semiconductors are built and designed in Taiwan. Of course, it is absolute science fiction, absolute. But let's imagine that for a reason or another, the Detroit between China and Taiwan is closed. It's totally science fiction, it will never happen. Huh? So no more semiconductors could be exported from Taiwan, a blocus. Total science fiction. In 3 weeks, all our European factories are closed. That's a fact. Of course, we cannot do everything on our own. But in this trend, there is a good news. The good news is that the market is increasing drastically. In other words, between now and 2030, the demand in semiconductors will double on the planet, moving from 500 billion to 1 trillion. So it means that all the semiconductors suppliers have to double their capacity. And guess what? European semiconductors players, like Infineon, NXP, STMicro, Bosch, and so on, but also, of course, the big players, like, for example, TSMC in Taiwan, we spoke about it, but also maybe Samsung in Korea or Intel in the US, they have to double their capacity, so they are looking for places to install new factories. And of course, installing a new factory, I mean, it means what for semiconductors? That's a huge investment. The unit is probably billions or 10 billion to build a factory of semiconductors. So not one single country can do it. And you need also skills. You need electricity. And of course, you need also a market. So US say, hey, we're here. By the way, they're also in the same position than us. They already produce only 10% of the global worldwide need in the US, like us, 10%. They said, hey, we can here, but of course, we want to have also the cutting edge technology, not only the 22 nanometers. We want to go below 10 nanometers, by the way, below 5 nanometers, by the way, below 2 nanometers. So now you can take a risk. So if you come to install this factory on my territory, we'll be able, using state aid while respecting competition rules, because you take a risk, we could help you a little bit to support your investment. And of course, you will use our resources, the skills, and you will settle in our territory. So since we need to double the number of factories, why should we say, but of course Europe will not be present. Huh? So I said, look, there's an opportunity. Why don't you come on our territory? Because we have the skills, we have the companies. By the way, in semiconductors, to invent the new applications, you need to be in proximity to the factories. From fab, we say, to lab. It's very important. because in the end you embed the software, the applications, when you manufacture the semiconductor. It's called packaging. So we said we could work on a specific act just to say, to welcome the one who would like to come in Europe, which will be beneficial for our industry, and by the way, at the same time, will secure also our supply chain. But of course, our objective is not to do everything on our own. That's impossible. It has nothing to do with protectionism. It has just something to do with our ability to manage, again, this very critical supply chain, to do it on our territory, with also other partners. But since we will do everything with this big package, 42 billion euros helping research. We are very strong in research, by the way, in Europe, helping also these new facilities. We will be a worldwide player, being able also to play with other players and with a right balance of power, making sure that our security of supply will be always on whatever could happen, even in terms of geopolitical situation that we, of course, cannot monitor. So that's exactly what we had in mind. It's still been, of course, totally open, respecting competition rules, but not being naive.
Yeah, thank you very much, Thierry. We all know that now you have to leave. I'm so sorry, but there were some kind of delays in early stage here. Thank you. Yeah, it's extremely expensive to create the new chips. You need at least 1 billion years to create a new chip. But to produce those chips, Terry said 10 billion. I would like to say it's 20 billion, which is needed to produce those chips. And to run this business, another 5 billion euros are needed. So 26 billion euros. It's a huge amount of money. And you don't know, will you succeed or not? So no single member state is able to produce alone really modern chips. So moving from 7 nanometers to 5 nanometers, it was possible to save 30% of energy. So to produce old-fashioned chips, it's not so big challenge for us. We have to produce the best chips in the world, and that's why we have to join our forces. Now, I would like to ask Ines, how people are thinking in Barcelona, in Catalonia, about sovereignty. Is it the same understanding that to produce something which is really best in the world, you have to join forces, you have to cooperate with others, or sovereignty means that you have to produce everything at your place?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me to be here. And Monsieur Breton has said that he doesn't like the word sovereignty because it means a different thing in every single country. And I think it means a different thing along the history. I mean, sovereignty doesn't mean the same thing in 2022 that it was in 2000 or 100 years ago. So we cannot be sovereign anymore. We cannot be sovereign anymore in Europe. If we understand sovereignty as the capability of living alone, of being independent, we can't do it anymore. In fact, if we would like to be sovereign, we need to give a piece of our sovereignty to a bigger issue, to a bigger political tool that is the European Union. And why? Because the main things right now in 2022, you cannot do them in your country. I mean, we can talk about chips. We need to collaborate to have the best technology in Europe, but we could think about defense. I mean, no single country in Europe could be sovereign in terms of defense. That's not working anymore. In fact, if you say how much do we spend in defense budget, we in Europe, every single country by his own budget, spend more or less 3 times more than Russia. But we don't share the same systems, and we don't have any kind of economies of scale. We spend more or less, a little bit less than China, but we don't have the capacity of China. So we cannot be sovereign anymore, at least as the way we used to think. And it's not a question of protectionism. I think protectionism doesn't protect, but isolationism does make you be isolated. So we need to think in Europe as a bigger family. Why? It's not because we share the same language, because we don't have the same language, it's not because we share the same religion, it's not because we share the same culture or gastronomy, it's because we share the same way of living. And technology is basic for understanding the way of living. So we cannot be sovereign anymore, but we can be powerful. We can be powerful. And in 2022, being powerful means have commercial power. So we can have power to choose our supplies or to make good decisions in terms of achieving the elements that we need. But, this is the last thing I say in that turn, we have to explain that in our countries, because populism and nationalism are saying, we need to take back control. You cannot have control in your countries if you don't collaborate, if you don't give a little bit of your sovereignty, because you cannot be independent anymore.
Yeah, exactly. A little bit of your sovereignty. Sovereignty, according to my understanding, is not some kind of black and white issue. You either have or don't have sovereignty. It's like in family relations, you know. Alone, you know, you are fully independent, but it's much nicer to live together with somebody, you know, and you have to lose something from your sovereignty. And it's nice, we all like it. And it's the same with nations, with the states, you know, if it's possible to do something together, and it will be a much more effective way to act, then why not? Carlo, we used to work together to create new telecom codes when you were minister and I was commissioner. So, but I know that you are experts in relations with the United States, between EU and the United States. So. We are not living alone in this world. Even in the European Union, you know, we are not able to act just alone. We have to cooperate with our partners, with our allies. How you can see those relations between the European Union and the United States of America? What about our sovereignty?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here. I'm new in Renew, so this is my first leaders meeting. First of all, we should consider that we are in a completely different paradigm compared to the last 30 years. So we no longer can rely on a very long global value chain. Why? Because geopolitical situation is completely different. We thought that we would have been in a flat world, all liberal democracies, and basically easy to deal with without many defense and geopolitical threat. It's not, as we see, is not like this. So this huge, I would say, project of the Western world partially failed. Now we are experiencing the consequences. which are, for example, security of supply. We do know that we cannot rely on only on the eastern part of the world, and is related to semiconductors, but we can exactly apply the same situation to steel, for example, or aluminum. And we should take this into account because, you know, in a way, we have a difficulty where Green Deal is creating creating a situation where investing in steel and aluminum, for example, is very difficult. But beyond this, beyond security of supply, we should consider also security of sales. Because if the situation is difficult when you have to supply some materials from you know, faraway countries, is exactly the same when you have to sell. Now, like 8 years ago, I guess, I was Vice Minister for Trade at that time, we started the negotiation for TTIP, as you may remember. TTIP was a very controversial agreement with the United States. But I think we should consider to reopen that negotiation. Why? Because I do think that we will have a completely different geopolitical and trade situation where basically we will be more and more integrated from the supply side and sales side with liberal democracies around the world. And of course, today we have a free trade agreement with Canada, for example, the CETA agreement. I was in the Trade Council when we negotiated that agreement, and it's a very positive agreement. But what is missing is the big market, which are United States. And of course, we are present there, but we know that there are so many tariff and non-tariff barriers existing that are really creating and jeopardizing our economic relations. So first of all, I think we should not only work in defense, creating a situation where we have our supply are more secure, but also we need to work in attack and try to find and try to improve, increase the number of goods that we can sell abroad to United States, and with the goods, the services. For example, as far as semiconductors are concerned, Intel is a company that is considering to make a huge investment in Europe because they have the same problem of security of supply in that sector. So I think we should consider very careful that the way in which we have conducted the trade policy so far, which has been basically we go multilateral and we want to sign agreement with, you know, China investment agreement, I mean, and all the other countries, and there is a kind of level playing field where you are looking for partners everywhere, is going to change. And if we don't use, you know, Biden presidency to start again a negotiation with the US, what will happen then? Maybe not. Let's cross fingers. But you know, at a certain point will be, again, maybe very difficult to do that work. And we need that. Because if we are losing markets, for example, Russia, but others will follow. I'm sure about that. Because when you have a critical situation, geopolitical critical situation, you have many others coming as a kind of domino effect. So we should consider to work in this way, trying to create a kind of transatlantic area, which will include Mexico and Canada, and strengthen the relation with a reliable party that yes, you can have a very bad president, but at the very end will work with us and share the same values.
Thank you very much, Carlo. Returning back to chips, yes. Those investments from Intel into Europe's economy will be really welcome, but as we know, everybody is worried about this situation in the world. In Taiwan, they are planning to invest during the next 3 years $100 billion into chips. In South Korea, during the next 9 years, $450 billion into chips, and Samsung is building a factory in the United States, $20 billion. So everybody is worried in those days. So We have to cooperate with our partners. The sovereignty does not mean that we have to isolate ourselves. Sovereignty does not mean that we have to deal with the protectionism. But the good news is that we have 10 more minutes here. And after that, everybody will warmly welcome to take part in this cocktail reception. But before reception, you have to deserve this invitation. You have to raise questions. It's up to you, either to take part in this reception or not. So please raise your questions.
Does it work? Yeah. Thank you, Mrs. Arimadas and Mr. Ansip. I'm from Genemer, the Belgian Liberals. So my question is more, first, I mean, it's two questions. First to Mrs. Arimadas. Can we learn maybe from the Spanish culture, their approach to trade and to opening their country to the Latin Americans and their collaboration together, and perhaps maybe use the best practices for Europe? Is there a way to learn from them? And for Mr. Calenda, culturally speaking, the Made in Italy brand, it's a big brand, it's an important brand. Do you think that the Italians, for example, as a small example, would be ready to relinquish some of their Made in Italy brand for a Made in Europe brand?
Let's start with Ines. Go ahead, please.
Yes, we in Spain, we know that we've been real potential with Latin America now, and we were the place where the supplies and all the things come from Latin America. But we were better because we were bigger, we were stronger, we were more powerful when we discovered all the new continent, and we had access to new things, new technology. We have to think about the word technology hundreds of years ago. But yes, I think Europe should be this bigger brother. I mean, in Europe, we have two types of countries. Small countries and countries that don't know they are small. Because Germany is small, France is a small country, Spain is a small country. Even I could say that Europe is a small if we compare with United States or we compare with China. So sovereignty for me is being more powerful. And we need to be together. We need to be more open. And it's true that our suppliers are not always reliable. We have seen that situation with Russia, with other countries where you don't have freedom. And we have the power to choose our suppliers, our technology, but we have to work together and with our partners, with our reliable partners, because we share the same values, we share the same way of living, we share freedom. So I think we should explain in our countries that we are very small, that we are small countries. France should do that. I mean, Belgium know that, and Netherlands know that. I mean, I feel that you are conscious about that you come from a little country. But when they speak to us, they say, yeah, you in Spain, because Spain is a big country. And I say, no, Spain is not a big country. Spain is a really small country, and Europe is small because we don't compete with the same rules. Europe is competing with China with not the same rules, because we have human rights, we have worker rights, we have bioethical limits, we have environmental issues. So we need to be together, to be conscious that we are small, even when we are together, and of course, to make more agreements with our partners, the partners that are reliable because they share the same values as we do.
Thank you, Ines, but I think all the countries in the European Union are really big countries. We don't have small countries, according to my understanding. But all those big countries are able to understand that they are not big enough to compete with the really big ones, with China and the United States of America. So we have to join our forces to compete with those really big ones. But
it's a more
I don't
polite
think
way
my
of saying,
Estonia is small country. No, it's big country. Carlo, go ahead, please.
Yeah, it's a very delicate question. You are asking to an Italian if we want to give away Ferrari. Now, I will finish here my political career if I answer yes. What I would say, though, is that, for example, Lamborghini is part of Audi Group. And many others brands, such as Bulgari, Bottega Veneta, are part of big French group. And they are growing very well. I'm very happy they have both these brands working properly, you know, to bring them on international markets. No, I don't think. I think we should consider that made in Italy for us is part of our heritage, and especially the Renaissance. Why? Because it's at the very cross of, you know, art and mechanics and technical skills. And you would be surprised to know that, you know, the most important sector for export in Italy is mechanics, much more than fashion, food. So I think that we should not cancel what is part of a common heritage. And what is very important is that made in Italy, such as made in France or made in Germany, is very useful to defend our product from counterfeiting or what we call European or Italian sounding. So all the products you buy abroad, thinking, because the name sounds like, you know, Italian, but they are not Italian or French or whatever. So this is very important, I guess. To be together won't mean we will cancel our culture differences or culture peculiarities. Is to put in common our cultural peculiarities and our differences. And this is something that, you know, give us more power and also enrich what is the European culture. Because at the very end, if you look at the Renaissance, of course, was an Italian invention, but was brought abroad by Francis I, who was a very important king of France. So all these interactions were already there. Now what we are trying to do is to give the political umbrella, the political identity to all these differences, but we need to maintain the differences because differences means that you are richer.
Thank you very much, Carlo. Thank you very much, Ines. Well, I don't think we don't have sovereignty anymore. We have sovereignty, but to act together, we can act in a more efficient way, and I prefer efficiency for staying alone. So, as we all know, all good things come to an end, and this conference is also coming to an end. I would like to thank all the organizers, of course, all the panelists, and I would like to cordially thank all of you being here in Bazaar this afternoon together with us. I'm looking forward to have the next conference, but now I would like to invite everybody for this cocktail party. Thank you. Thank you.